WeSizwe party says their political philosophy is Pan-Africanism. Wow. And their ideology is the liberation movement that they are. That is their ideology. I mean, a bizarre way, rather, of defining and explaining yourselves, as an organization, ideologically. To say our ideology is the liberation movement that we are. That is the ideology. A bizarre way. I've never heard ideology defined and explained on such terms. And this came, from the mouth of the Secretary General, Dr. Sfiso Maseko. You can go back and watch that media briefing video. It's on YouTube. Political philosophy is Pan-Africanism, and ideology is the liberation movement that we are. So what, a shocking revelation as to their political philosophy, and a bizarre, fashion in which they explained and defined themselves ideologically to say their ideology is the liberation movement that they are. Never heard ideology explained and defined, on such terms. And now the president linchpin of his presentation, his media briefing, was premised on how our country was taken. By our country, the assumption would be he's referring to himself and us, the natives. Our country was taken, and how the MK's drive is premised on engaging in a struggle to bring our country back. And as I listened to him from the beginning of his address, before the media conference, I thought he meant himself and us, the native, himself being a native, and us, the rest of fellow natives, to him. But voila, towards the end of his presentation, I saw an impression. I saw him actually saying things that were ridiculing the impression that from the beginning of his address were made by himself. So bringing our country back, and I asked myself a question. MK is about bringing our country back. From who to who? Back to who? Then the supposition here is it is the natives, the indigenous people. He used the term indigenous to refer to the natives, to refer to people to whom the land rightfully belongs. But he was using the term country and not the land. And as I followed, investigatively, critically, up on what he was presenting, another thing that he introduced was one of the reasons for their formation as Mkhonto WeSizwe party was that there was a need to come and correct politics about our country and operations. That's how he put it, to correct politics about our country and operations. That's how he cursorily and loosely, put it. And I asked myself, politics about our country that he said the formation of MK was based on a need for correcting. Whose politics are those? Because at the same time, he bemoans the ANC of Ramaphosa and not the ANC he presided over. So the ANC that he started waging, fight against is the ANC of Ramaphosa. ANC was proper. ANC was true to what its ancestors, people whom he says are his ancestors. He will never leave ANC because he will be disrespecting his ancestors. So now the ANC remained true to the vision of its ancestors, or founder ancestors, until Ramaphosa came. Now, what he waged, what he's waging, a fight, against is the ANC of Ramaphosa and not the ANC that he, as Ramaphosa's predecessor, presided over. Now, whose politics about the country now is he saying the MKP is founded on the basis of correcting? Whose politics? From whose framework? Organized by who? He's silent on that. So I found that to be really making the problem, too abstract for the minds of the naive and unsuspecting to be able to penetratively zoom into, observe, analyze, and be able to rightly divide and put everything into its category. And then another thing that I found interesting that he said, as I was asking myself, they're about bringing the country back, ask back to who, bringing it back from who to who. And I suspect that it's not about the indigenous people being rallied to take back their land and reestablishing, reestablishing their own sovereignty as the indigenous people, as the natives, and on the basis of their own criterion of statehood, based on their own, African indigenous worldviews, on polity. I suspect that it's not about that. I suspect that they are just another organization that is founded to engage in politics of reformism as opposed to engaging in revolutionary politics. Politics, geared at completely obliterating all forms of alienation and all threats, either in a human form or institutionally existing, threatening the survival of the natives or the indigenous people of the land. From his presentation, I discovered that not even MKP, is about that, because ridiculing the impression that he made, when he started off, laying it out, to us to give an impression that they were a revolutionary movement, about, fighting, for the natives and have the natives, land reconquered, repossessed, restored back to them for them to reestablish their own sovereignty. Now, he then makes a U-turn to say that the greatest conspiracy against the natives was us being taken out of everything in South Africa. And he made reference to right to vote or be voted for. But the fundamental problem here, this is my critique, is not us being taken out of everything in South Africa. South Africa, when it was established, I'm referring to the state entity called the Union Government or the Republic of South Africa, when it was established in 1910 as a creature of the British, Parliament, statute called South Africa Act of 1909. South Africa was a statutory creature, of Britain in its act of mediation in, the Anglo-Boer War, the conflict between the British and the Boers, people of Dutch descent. So when they established this state called the Republic of South Africa, they did not establish it with us. First and foremost, these are invader European groups which came and got to be in conflict with each other over the spoils of wars that they fought against the natives, to invade them, to dispossess them. Now, for them to form, a truce, a union government was formed, a union between the Brits and the people of Dutch descent, which excluded the natives. Not that I expect them to have, I expect them to, not that, not that I expect them to have included the natives in that. First and foremost, their very existence on our existential space is illegitimate, including the state entity called the Republic of South Africa that they established in 1910. Because then that was making or giving their invasion, political fullness and legitimization when they established the Republic of South Africa. So we were not excluded from being voted into this criminal, settler polity called the Republic of South Africa, a polity, a state entity that land thieves imposed on the natives after they invaded, dispossessed, and displaced the natives on the land of their birth. So we had no business, first and foremost, participating within processes and systems of the Republic of South Africa. So what does it mean? The greatest conspiracy was us being excluded from running, from participating, in the government, in the running of the country, from, voting or being voted for. This is, what I referred to earlier, that the impression in his presentation that he first made was that they are a revolutionary movement of the natives, of the indigenous people, pushing an exclusively black agenda for the building of black power and the re-establishment of, our sovereignty as the natives and indigenous people of the land, taking the land from the thieves and their successors in title, their descendants, with whom we coexist, in a way, with them today, that the imperialist international law says they got naturalized, meaning they became indigenous to the land through fictitious means employed by so-called international law. Another branch of law that we have no business recognizing if we are really true about fighting for our own sovereignty. And then Zuma bemoans that whites took us out of everything in South Africa, a right to vote or to be voted for, a right, to participate in the running of the country. No, they invaded our land. They did not take away our right to participate in the running of the country. They were not supposed to be here in the first place. They came here waging, an unprovoked war on the indigenous people, on the natives, to dispossess them of what rightfully belonged to them, and thereafter establishing a state entity called the Union government. that we were ab initio not part of. For Zuma to say, which is, quite ridiculous, we were taken out of. No, we were not taken out of anything. We were invaded, dispossessed, of our land, and, had gotten displaced. Had our cultures, misoriented, our consciousness disoriented. That's what happened. Had blood-soaked, had religions that are foreign to us blood-soaked into our minds. Had our sacred, things vilified, desecrated. So we're the ones who have had all these forms of violence meted out on us. We were not taken out of anything that we were part of. The only thing that happened is the land we were found owning, we were found occupying, we were found living in, was invaded by these scoundrels from Europe, and they displaced us in their dispossessions that were brutal, murderers, they did that with impunity. So we never lost our right to participate in anything. That's not what we lost. We lost our land. We lost our sovereignty with the land. And that's why we are where we are. So now it means MKP is also about engaging in politics of reformism. That's what I said. My guesstimation was this is another ANC outside the ANC, like the EFF. And President Zuma hit the last, nail, on the coffin to actually confirm the suspicions that I developed as I was following his, speech at that media briefing. And he said that, they, the MK, are of the view that we are closer to our liberation, and called, on us to join together to reach, that liberation, and to have this country in peace with everyone. And then he said, including whites. So this is just another organization that is bent on liberal reformist agenda that is pushed by people who feel an earnest need to give assurances to the very same people who are successors in title in land thievery. The very same people who benefited from and who continue to benefit from conditions that were contrived to prevent our development, to prevent our rise, to weaken our resistance, and God has settled for politics of expediency, being swayed, away from revolutionary politics, being swayed away from race war realities. So this was just my critique on, the new kid in the block, Mkhonto WeSizwe party, because I needed to understand what is this about. It's just another formation that is a conduit of politics requiring cooperation of white people, politics requiring cooperation of our criminal settler, abusers, invaders, murderers, so scoundrels, basically. So I don't buy it. I don't buy it.